Well, we'll do the official welcome. I'm Becky Waller, dietitian at the Cancer Survivorship Center, and tonight we're having our Q&A that's talking about carcinogens in food. Now, for any of you who have not been in a Q&A, this is only our second one here, is the whole purpose is I do have some slides to share, but I really want it to be more conversational. So if you have questions, I want you to ask questions. I think we learn a lot from each other. Obviously, within the realm of all possible carcinogens in the world and the ever increasing lists of worry about this, watch out for that, I'm not going to cover everything. It's impossible. So we're trying to keep it focused in on food. I know there's environment, there's all these other things going on, but we're going to try to see what we can say as far as the things we're ingesting and what effect that could have on our health. So I'm just going to start now with kind of doing a couple slides, but like I said, please ask questions. If you have a question and I have my screen shared, just say something like, hey, stop me. I don't mind. I don't want to just sit and talk at you guys. I like when you guys ask me and let me know what you're thinking. Sorry. All right. So here we go. Get into our carcinogens in food. All right, so I'll minimize us. All right, so like I said, this is a Q&A. So if you have questions, if you don't understand something, if you have another thought, like I really want us to be able to go back and forth and kind of get some ideas going about, what is going on with what I eat, how it could be helpful to my body, how some things might be harmful, and finding that middle ground, because I never want anyone to walk away worried or feel like, oh my gosh, there's nothing I can do. So my first highlight point is when you are looking at any information that's talking about, carcinogens in food, eat this, don't eat that, watch out for this, make sure that you're linking back to a reputable source. So I just put a couple on here, like the World Health Organization has an International Research Center on Cancer, and the acronym for that is IARC. So they're good at classifying carcinogens by determining how likely they are to cause cancer. And there's a scale, it could be known, probable, possible, unclassified, and probably not. And you'll know that everything's not absolute. Known is the highest level that there is. There are also in the US, we have the NTP, or National Toxicology Program. So that's actually just a list of just, known or probable or unclassified toxins or carcinogens, so that you can see, and it's all in alphabetical order. Most of them, when you're flipping through this, are like crazy chemical names that you probably have no idea what it is. So it does make it challenging in some ways, easy in other, because if we're looking at, food, it kind of breaks things down a little bit. We will talk about different possible carcinogens that are formed in our food from cooking, because that's really the biggest thing that's going to come up now. And there's also the NIH. And I referred in this, any information I'm giving you, I always refer back to these research centers, including some other cancer research centers in Australia and in England. So I'm really trying to give you the best information I can get, rather than just Google it and here's the top 10 list. And I think that's what's a little bit scary, because a lot of times it kind of looks like gloom and doom and everything's going to cause harm to my body. So referencing back and kind of looking at American Cancer Society, and this is a good statement to look at, is that carcinogens do not cause cancer at all times under all circumstances. So that's what makes this topic, reassuring in some ways, but challenging in others, because I could be the same person in a same group of friends that kind of eat similar, and you might find one person develops cancer and another doesn't. So it doesn't always mean it's going to happen in every single person every single time that they are exposed. You'll see in this, sometimes it depends on how you're exposed. Did you swallow it? Did you touch it? Is it something that, just based on your genes, you're more prone to this type of cancer? Certain things, it can take time. We find, like with smoking, It's not like you smoke one cigarette and you're guaranteed to get cancer, but you smoke for 20, 30, 40 years, you have much higher risk of developing cancer. But you can see people have been lifetime smokers who never get cancer, and someone else who has lung cancer that never touched a cigarette. So that's sort of the convoluted road that we have with carcinogens. So it's giving us the best information we have to make adjustments in our diet and lifestyle, but not thinking, one episode of this and I'm done for. So, and that's again, we want to make sure that we're referring back to the agencies that report specifics about this. So everything is going to be a little different for each person. Now, I wanted to start with grilling because in my last, group that I had, it really specifically came up a lot of questions about, is it safe to grill food? Do I need to worry about what's happening in my food when I'm grilling it? So that's step one. Really, what can be harmful in any sort of cooking, whether it is grilling or anything where you're getting direct heat exposure, is the formation of these heterocyclic amines or the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, so the HCAs and the PAHs. So they're chemicals that form on meat. Now, any meat, if it's an animal protein, it can form these. Either one, it doesn't matter. It could be beef, pork, fish, poultry, if you're cooking at high temperatures. So when they found that they can be mutagenic, these HCAs and PAHs, which means they can cause changes in your DNA and could increase your risk for cancer. So obviously, if I'm eating foods, grilling, this is really going to be when you're seeing things that are charred, getting a more of a burn, getting a char on it. That's where you're going to see the HCAs being formed. You will see the PAHs are formed more from the dripping of fats onto coals and getting smoke and splashback and flame up from the heat that's below that can cause the PAHs. So when you're looking at more indirect cooking methods and things that you may do more in your house, like if I'm stewing something, steaming, braising, poaching, I have much less incidence. I'm not really going to be forming the HCAs and the PAHs because I'm not getting these high intense temperatures that are causing charring and burning on the meat surface. Also, that charcoal grills can lead to more PAH formation, because the other question that I had sent to me ahead of time, which I love, had questions ahead of time are very helpful because I have time to like research and look into things. So when I have a charcoal grill, and I'm going to go to this next thing, looking specifically at the HCAs and the PAHs, is that with PAHs and you're getting flame up, if I have a fatty piece of meat, I got a nice steak on there, that fat is going to cook and start dripping on the coals, which, down below, I'm going to get much more of this formation because that fat is going to be causing more smoke to come up and flame up than if I was using a gas grill. Gas grill, a lot of times they've redesigned things so you can get a little bit more indirect heat. Sometimes there's like wider, covers over the grill, over the heat source, so the flame is not coming in direct contact with the meat. So those things can make charcoal grilling a little bit more risky for these, but there's always different ways to manipulate it when you're cooking. If you're cooking things to well done, you are going to be at high temperatures. It could be the amount of temperature you're using. So if I got really high heat, big flames going on, or if I'm keeping it over the flame for a long period of time to the point that it's well done and a little charred, I'm going to be forming more of these HCAs. So I can lower the temperature. I can decrease the amount of time that's in there. If I want to decrease my PAHs, I'm going to maybe move the meat, so it's not directly over the heat source. I can move it to the edges. Sometimes you can have, racks that are built into the grill or the gas grill that keep it up a little higher. So it, removes it away, or moves it away from that heat source. All of those little adjustments can make it less likely to be producing as many of these. So eating large quantities of well done food, it will happen with fried food, grilled meats. It can increase your risk of colorectal, pancreatic, and prostate cancer. Those seem to be the big ones that are more related to these type of carcinogens. And you'll see the World Health Organization's cancer research, the IARC classifies these as probably carcinogenic to humans. So that's pretty strong statement that we've seen a link with it. So you need to make sure that you're not eating too many of these and that you're reducing your cooking times, and the amount of like fried foods that you're eating if you don't want to have these type of carcinogens on a regular basis in your diet. Now, you can always balance this out with tips. How can I make grilling healthier? If it's summer and you like to spend a little bit more time using your grill, it's a nice way to be able to entertain other people and still keep outside in the fresh air, then there are techniques that we can use. So it's not a don't grill, it's going to cause cancer. It's let's be thoughtful in our grilling. Flavoring with herbs and spices is a really huge way that you can add some, foods that are going to fight the cancer. You're getting those good antioxidant qualities that come with herbs and spices. So the oils in these compounds can reduce the formation of the HCAs and the PAHs. We'll see, I gave two examples here. Rosemary can decrease it by 90%. Garlic can decrease the HCAs by 70%. So that's a huge amount that if I'm going to take, you'll see beneficial ones, basil, sage, thyme, and oregano, that this is a nice way to be able to add in, a little bit of a spice rub and keep things from forming. So I just saw I have two questions. So if it's not burnt on the grill, is it okay? Is the first question. Yes. When we're looking specifically at these carcinogens, the HCAs and the PAHs, when it's not grilled, you're not really consuming as many. If you're doing a nice low temperature, indirect heat, then your risk is significantly lower. And does a air fryer cause the same effect as frying food? No, because air fryer is just using, it's not a super high air temperature. It's not causing any sort of charring. And also with an air fryer, it's decreasing fat. You're not adding fat to anything, and fat is the other factor that really causes more issues when it comes to carcinogens. So air fryers are a great technique of being able to cook foods and get a nice texture in it without adding in more fat, which we are definitely going to address in this, of that factor of being carcinogens. So, another thing you can do in your grilling is looking at acid-based marinades. So vinegar, lemon juice, lime juice, yogurt, wine, and beer. We use them for flavor, but they decrease these HCAs by 99%. So doing a nice marinade on your chicken breast is not only making it taste good, but it's really cutting down on carcinogens to the point where you're almost getting none. So that would be a good option, and it's easy. Even with beer and wine having alcohol, by the time you're cooking them, you're cooking off a lot of the alcohol that would be more of a risk related to cancer risk. So all good options when it comes to making grilling into something that tastes good, but also is a little less concern for our health. All right. Further on, don't overcook. So if you have blackened and charred piece of meats, that's 3 times the HCAs that you would see in a medium rare cooked meat. Doesn't matter if it's beef or chicken, you can still form the HCAs, and the PAHs. You are better off cooking whole cuts of meat, this meaning actual animal protein, not the processed things like, bratwursts and Italian sausages, things that have really been a combination and have a lot of like fillers and preservatives added to it, because those again introduce like nitrates and other components that increase your risk for cancer. So take a processed meat, now blacken it on the grill. It's a lot riskier than doing like a piece of tilapia with indirect heat. Using leaner cuts of meat is also important, because really we look at the fat dripping when it's this PAH formation. Just that PAH factor comes from extra fat and flame ups. There's also the reality that fat itself can be an issue when it comes to, our risk as far as cancer. And I'll get into that in a couple minutes. So another option is grilling fruits and vegetables. They do not form HCAs no matter how you cook them, but if you burn them, they can form a different type of carcinogen, which is the benzopyrenes. So the moral of the story here is don't char things beyond, recognizing them. Really try to go with low and slow, lower temperature, give it a little bit more time. If you're on high temperature, don't keep it on as long. It's going to be better off. All right. Then we have, and I do have another question. Let me move forward on this. All right. Another question came to me asking, last night in an email, just saying that person had bought a grill or got I think a new grill rack. And it had this warning on it was California's Proposition 65, or if you buy anything from California, it may come labeled with the words Prop 65, which is short for Proposition 65. What this is due to a ruling in California that anything that they sell as, goods that can go to someone's home or to a person and contains any chemicals that have been linked with causing cancer, birth defects, reproductive harm, are required to have this labeling on it. So wherever you are in the country, if I order it and it gets shipped from California, it will have this Prop 65 come with it. If I buy something that's manufactured in, Boston, it's not going to have this. So it can be a little alarming when you open up your brand new grill, your, grill cover, and you find that it has this warning saying this may cause cancer. So what that is, it's saying, any of these chemicals, they are required to tell you. So it could be, you'll see on the list, electrical wires, jewelry, padlocks, dishes, a lot of cookware can have this, flashlights, pesticides, and on and on and on. As of August 2018, they needed to give you at least one of the chemicals that is in there that there's a concern, whether it's cancer, birth defects, reproductive harm. They had to list that. So in the email I received, what came up is that this, grill rack had nickel in it. And it does appear when you go into the lists, of these reputable sources that nickel is something that is known to be linked with possibly causing cancer in humans. It's on that high list. The label, so that's just one of the things that was in there. For anything else that's in there, the company only has to tell you one of the items. It may have multiple items that are linked to cancer, but they're only required at this point to tell you about one of them. So just for a second, let me stop sharing my screen. All right. So with this, you have your grill rack, and now you have this warning saying nickel might cause cancer. Now, when you look up nickel and you see what the risks are, what it is that if you have direct contact with it, if you ingest it or inhale it in some way, that's where you see most of the risk when it comes to nickel. Now, the reason nickel is in this wire rack that is going on the grill is that it's stainless steel. Stainless steel, at least the ingredient or the components I looked up in stainless steel, they listed off about 8 to 10 different types of metal that can be combined in there, made as alloys. And that is what constitutes stainless steel. So the rack is not 100% nickel. It has that as one of the components. They do not need to tell you the percentage. It could be a very small percentage. It could be 30%. No idea exactly how much nickel is in there. Really with nickel, when you look at the history and where they found most of the incidence of cancer is when people were in nickel manufacturing, using nickel in factories, and it was ground up and you were getting a fine dust. They saw that people who were inhaling it, bigger incidence of lung cancer and also some nasal tumors, nasal cancerous tumors, because it was becoming in the air, it was getting in direct contact with those areas, and due, to the length of exposure, these people eventually developed cancer. So when we go back and look at the wire rack, one of the reasons they put nickel in it along with these other metals is that it helps prevent it from corroding. So when it's fully intact, brand new, heating up nickel does not create a vapor that is going to get in your food. It is still going to be part of the alloy that's getting hot. So it's not going to be imparting cancer right into the meats. The bigger risk is if I have something that's old that has nickel in it or other metals, and now it's starting to rust a little bit, it's breaking down, maybe some of it's getting onto my food. I'm not 100% getting it off. I'm starting to ingest it. Then yes, it's going to fall in that point into being a higher risk as far as your contact. Now, you could go over the top and be really worried about nickel, but the reality is most stainless steel items, including a majority of the appliances in our houses and stainless steel cookware, have some nickel in it. That's just where it's coming from. So there are some brands that are safer. You can use cast iron. You could look for using more glass. And this is obviously more so not for grilling, but if I'm going to be cooking, if you're going to go La Crosette and you're going to use something that's more of like an enameled sort of item, then you can cut down on that contact and the risk. And there's more companies that are making nickel-free or non-stainless steel cookware that is going to decrease your incidence of getting in contact with chemicals that could lead to cancer. So that is where that Prop 65 comes from. And it was interesting because I'd never heard of that specific law until I looked it up last night, but it is something to be aware of if you're getting things shipped to you and it comes from California, you might get that warning. So it gives you a little something that you can kind of look into and see what it has to say about it and determine for yourself, is this a risk I want to take, or is this something that maybe I'm not going to use? So that's where that little piece came from. All right, let me see if I missed any more chats that were coming up. Nope. All right, let's go back to sharing. Does anyone have any questions about that so far, specifically with the nickel, the metals? I mean, no one. Oh yes, Sue.
So I have stainless steel cookware that I've been using like for 20 years. Do you think it's dangerous? I mean, it was a good quality stainless steel.
I mean, if things are starting to like rust, chip, break down, in reality, how much is actually coming off and getting in your food? It's hard to say. Do I think it depends on the source you're looking at? As far as the research areas, they're not saying don't use stainless steel. They're saying these separate components can cause an increased risk, but how much of that is actually becoming in contact with you? That's the bigger question. I mean, there are people who have nickel allergies and like can't even touch those things. And that, the more you're getting contact with allergens, that can produce other health problems. But am I going to say throw away all your stainless steel and only buy the other ones? I can't give you a full answer that that's a problem. But the more you're using alternative type, if I'm using some glassware and I'm, using some enameled ware, that cuts down on the amount of contact and decreases your risk. But it might be something that for anyone else, if you're replacing items, it's an option to look into things that don't have as many of those metals that are a problem, going forward. All right. Is it okay if I share and move on, ladies?
Becky, one quick question.
Yes.
Did you say cast iron was good to use? Cast iron cookware?
Cast iron can be better for you. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
My grandmother must have known something. That's all she ever used.
I know basics, things were so simple for a long time. I think as we've gotten a little more complicated, and I mean, there's like whole forums. I was going down a stainless steel wormhole last night because you have like the Stainless Steel Organization of the United States saying it's all fine, and then you have other ones saying don't touch. So it does become this battle on the internet, which makes it super confusing, because you do have a lot of back and forth. And I think the big takeaway with anything is that if you get these huge flashy titles that are like, never touch this is the worst, here's the top 10 carcinogens in the world, you have to kind of look a little closer and dig into it a little bit, because so many things are meant to grab our attention on the internet that a lot of the real information gets lost in that translation, and you end up having some misinformation that become urban legends. They become something we all end up believing, which, let me share this because I'm getting on to my most frustrating urban legend that I run into almost, a couple times a week here. So let me click where we left off. So remember, I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm really just trying to share information so you kind of understand where these things are coming from. You know, that's why there isn't like a big list of specific foods. It's all these other components of food that tend to be more the carcinogens. It's not like if you eat a plum, it's cancerous. It's, you know, we have to look at what's being done to the food. Most of it's in the processing that makes these whole foods risky. We're eating just whole foods, we tend to run into less problems. So these advanced glycation end products, or the acronym AGE. So these are other things that can be found in food that have been shown to be carcinogenic. So the Maillard reaction, which occurs when sugars and proteins react with heat. So you get, you know, nice caramelized onions when I throw a little sugar over heat, and I get that wonderful toasty, roasty, fun taste. You know, the Maillard reaction also happens with toasting and roasting and grilling. So though you're more at risk of making these age carcinogens. So they can happen during pasteurization, drying, smoking, frying, microwaving, and grilling. It's all related to heat. So any food that has sugars, fats, and proteins is fair game. So that's what everything, everything is sugar, you know, one of those things. So you know, again, more heat, the more, you know, the more put into cook it, grill it, warm it, you're more likely to form these byproducts. Now, when we look at plant-based foods, they have a lot less of these byproducts as long as they're less processed and they're not deep fried. So if I'm going to use like lentils and heat them up, I am much less likely to end up with these age byproducts than I would if I am cooking a steak. So again, we see sort of the value of looking at pushing towards some more plant-based foods for our diet when we're trying to limit the effect of foods that might be leading to more cancer risk. So diets that have more raw foods contain minimal of these age byproducts. As far as, you know, decreasing the amount that we have, we want to keep cooking temperatures below, you know, basically 446 degrees Fahrenheit to decrease this. So whenever you're getting, you know, really broiling, fried foods, even grilling, you're more likely to develop these. So lower temperature, again, not overdoing it, not making, you know, a lot more charred meats. You'll see the highest ones in these AGEs are going to be meats, butter and margarine, because it's now we have, you know, dairy that's been processed down more, processed cheeses, mayonnaise, refined oils like vegetable oil. We're not talking whole oils, but like combination of different types of oils, and then roasted nuts if they're done at high temperatures. You know, the lowest are going to be in unprocessed grains or minimally processed grains. So if I'm using like brown rice, any of my legumes, breads, which is a little surprising because they're processed to a degree because you're making, you know, you're taking a whole grain and processing it down. So I don't know why the AGEs are low in bread, because it's not an unprocessed grain, but it's on the list. Milk and yogurt products, because they're really minimally processed other than possibly if they're pasteurized. So, but still haven't formed as many AGEs as some of the other things. And then vegetables and fruits. So vegetables, if I'm frying them, if I'm making, you know, making like onion rings, then I can run into having more of these byproducts. But on their own, fruits and vegetables, very low in these carcinogenic foods. All right, I'll go past that Prop 60. All right, so onto the list of things that actually appear on the IARC considering carcinogenic to humans. Alcohol for sure falls on the list. You know, when the body metabolizes alcohol, I'm going to say this wrong, it produces acetaldehyde. I had to look this up on Google and I said it so well earlier and now I've lost it. But anyway, this chemical compound can damage DNA and it can lead to cancer. Now, really, when you're looking at research, the more intake of alcohol, higher the risk or incidence we see with cancer. It's not like if I have, after my 1000th drink in my lifetime, I'm definitely going to get cancer. But like we said, given environment, the person, lifestyle, genetics, there's lots of difference that can interplay whether alcohol is going to increase your risk for developing cancer or family member or friend. But it's definitely in there that you need to do it, use it in moderation, because we see a lot more incidents, head and neck cancers, like mouth, tongue cancer, esophageal, liver, because it's where the alcohol is processed through. Breast cancer is definitely has a link to alcohol intake, and then colorectal cancers. So trying to keep this at a limit of like one a day for women or 2 drinks a day or less for men is really, sort of the best thing if you're not abstaining completely. But alcohol does have a risk. Now, I will make one note, if anyone came in late or got kicked out, this is live streamed on the YouTube channel for the Cancer Survivorship Center. So if you missed anything or want to go back, it will be there immediately. It's there right now, so you'll be able to click on it. So do not overdo alcohol. Processed meats, again, considered carcinogenic, and it's due to, the curing and salting and smoking and, temperature again, and adding chemical preservatives. So bacon, sausage, hot dogs, pepperoni, prosciutto, beef jerky, even if it's like a chicken or a turkey base, because of the way it's processed and cured and preserved, you have a lot higher incidence of running into a cancer risk. So research found that eating 50 grams of processed meat, which would look like, the example is 4 strips of bacon or 1 hot dog, every single day, increase your risk for colorectal cancer by 18%. So that's obviously, observational. They're not going to hire people on and feed them processed meat for their entire life and see what happens to that group compared to a plant-based group. But looking at what's going on in the world has been a very helpful way for us to be able to see how food affects our bodies. So, if you do eat anything that's processed, you're looking for more nitrate-free versions. There's a lot more companies that are doing that, and you don't have all the added preservatives to help decrease the amount of chemicals that you're taking in. For sure, red meat has been put on the list because it's considered probably, not definitely, but probably carcinogenic to humans. It has a strong, when we look at diets where people eat a lot of red meat, you see a lot more incidence of colorectal cancer. Also, getting into that GI tract, when you look at pancreatic cancer and even prostate cancer. So the Cancer Council for Australia recommends eating no more, and I'll put it into ounces, what we're used to, 2.3 to 3.5 ounces of red meat per week. So that would be like a little petite fillet. That's all the red meat that they recommend if you want to decrease your risk of cancer. This is one here. I'm going to go back for a second. I will go back to, I'm going to stop sharing. So one of the big places that they've found the evidence of what is linking food, with cancer is looking at observational studies of different areas of the world. Like I said, you can't hire someone on and say, we're going to feed you this food and see if it causes cancer. A lot of that's done with animal studies. Not all animal studies directly link to human. And sometimes the amount of these chemicals they're giving the animals might be far more than a human would ever ingest. And they can't say 100% that it's going to translate that way. But what they can do is look at different populations, their diets over the years, and see where are we seeing higher incidence of cancer and what types, and where are we seeing it lower. So one of the bigger observational research studies done was back in the 1980s, and it's called the China Project. And it's interesting because China is very large and they have a lot of rural areas that they found that the people in those rural areas will spend, 90% of them stay there their entire life, which means they live in the same area, they eat the same type of foods, and they also in those rural areas do not get a lot of transport of food in. So everything they eat tends to come from what they grow, what's locally available. So it's a really great way when scientists are looking at these different rural areas. They could look at one part of China that maybe did more plant-based foods because they didn't have like cattle available. So, their diet would be different from another rural area in China that had different types of foods available. And they could see a very different type of dynamic when it came to cancer risk. So they're able to use this to get a lot of the information we have today when we look at red meat, when we look at, how diet is affecting people with similar lifestyles and what we need to be worried about and maybe what we should adjust. Now, they compared this to the standard American diet. And the unfortunate thing is when you take an acronym for standard American diet, it spells SAD. So they looked at the SAD diet, which would be our diet. And they said, how does this link up with the China study? And what are we seeing as far as decreasing cancer risk in the places that have more? So let me turn back. I have lots of notes on this. So with that, they found that in the typical Chinese diet compared to the westernized diet, the SAD diet, they take in less fat, they have higher fiber. Their fiber intake in the China project was about 10 grams at the least, up to 77 grams of fiber per day. Now, I've been a dietitian now for almost 19 years, do a lot of diet histories. I look at people, what they eat, and also fiber. Now, the recommendation from the American Heart Association, and when we look at the diet in the US, is usually saying we should have about 20 to 25 grams. I'd say the majority of people I see probably eat about 10 to 13 because they don't eat a lot of vegetables, they eat a lot of refined grains. So we do tend to have a really low amount of fiber. And so for the majority of China, they're far beyond us when it comes to fiber, which is coming from whole grains, from plants, from fruits and vegetables. So we don't ever meet their standard when it comes to fiber. And then animal products tend to be a lot lower in many areas of China. If you're looking at the percentage of their diet that comes from animal products, it might be 0% up to 20. The typical Western diet has 60 to 80% of their diet coming from animal products, whether it is actual meat like chicken, fish, beef, pork, or dairy products or other derivatives that come from that. So what they've seen is that we have more breast, prostate, ovarian, and uterus cancers, and that can be aggravated by fat intake, which increases, the different reproductive hormones brought on by eating more of the animal products like meat, more sugar, and more dairy, which is typical in the American diet. Now, some of this is directly linked possibly with the animal product. When we look at like fats that come from red meat, we're looking at more of those saturated fats. We don't see the same amount of risk related to fat intake when it's coming from vegetables. So if I'm eating avocados every day and some olive oil and getting those vegetable fats, the link is not seen as the same in the amount of cancer. So there is something to be said with these fats and more saturated fats that we're getting in animal products, and then trans fats if you're doing more fried foods and chips and things like that. So fat definitely has a big link when it comes to cancer. Now, one thing, they didn't say, and this is where we go back to sharing the screen and kind of going into the idea of urban legends, is sugar. So let me click on this. All right, so now sugar / glucose is not on any known carcinogen list. If you look at the different lists that are there, they don't say glucose definitely going to cause cancer. And it's, again, one of those oversimplified things where whether someone has cancer, someone with cancer, or never had cancer, but is just kind of like, talking about sugar, a lot of times the statement is, I know sugar causes cancer. And that's not the direct link. And it becomes more of a dangerous thought process when you look at people who go to the extreme and take take out soda. Yeah. Can you take out ice cream and candy? Absolutely. Those simple sugars we know aren't as healthy for us. We see the increase in heart disease. We see the increase in diabetes. When it comes to sugar and we're thinking that simple white stuff, it will turn into is glucose. Glucose is what every single food that is a carbohydrate, whether we are talking about a soda or we're talking about a whole grain, buckwheat, when I digest it and I break it down into its most simple molecules so it can run through my bloodstream and give energy to the rest of my cells, it is going to be glucose. Everything turns into glucose. It's the only way that carbohydrates are broken down and transported throughout our body. So if you simplify in your head and say all sugar and glucose cause cancer, that means anything, including, my good whole grains, including fruit, all that stuff needs to be removed from my diet if I believe that's going to feed cancer. There are no randomized controlled studies that show sugar directly causes cancer. There is, however, an indirect link between sugar and cancer. So what really is happening is that eating a lot of high sugar foods, cakes, cookies, sodas, it will lead to excess intake. Too many calories. What happens? I don't use it. It turns into fat and I end up gaining weight. And weight gain and excess body weight is what is related and linked to cancer. So it's not the sugar, it's more the excess that's causing it. Sugar itself, our body is designed to use the glucose and move it around, but it's also a very finite design. I can manage about 2 teaspoons of sugar running through my system at a time. So if we're looking at that and realistically, why we might see more cancer and obesity in the United States is that you grab a 20-ounce bottle of a soda pop. It's hot day, I'm thirsty, I grab a Coke, I grab a Sprite, Mountain Dew. Those average about like 77 grams of sugar. Turning that into teaspoons, the math on that is 19 teaspoons of sugar in one bottle. So if I'm chugging down a good 19 grams of teaspoons at one time and my body only can manage 2 teaspoons at a time, the rest of that is going to be stored away. You do that as a regular habit throughout life, whether you're doing it in liquid form, you're eating excess sugars, bigger portions of chips and things that are breaking down into glucose regularly, you are getting excess storage of these foods as fat to use later, which is increasing those hormones like insulin, which can increase your reproductive hormones, where we see estrogens and testosterones that will feed cancer. So that's really where it's coming from. When we're looking at slow burning sugars, like using buckwheat, that does not very quickly convert, into glucose to run through my body. If I have table sugar, it can be 1 to 3 molecules of sugar, very quick, doesn't take a lot to digest it. But when I'm getting into some of these whole grains, it can be up to like 1,000 molecules. So it takes a lot longer for that to break down. So I'm not getting a dump of sugar at one time. I'm getting a nice, slow, controlled burn that's much better and easier for my body to handle. In addition, with those complex carbohydrates, you're getting a lot of fiber. And fiber is amazing. And the reason that when you look at like the China project, and they found they have 3 times the fiber intake of the United States or many other countries, that they see a decrease in colon and rectal cancer. So there is something to be said, like when you look at fiber and its ability to, here, I'm going to turn to my fiber. So high fiber can help because it binds with sex hormones. So if you have these estrogens and these testosterones flowing through your system, the fiber can help bind with that and remove them from your body so they're not constantly recirculating. So it is a nice balancing form of not only balancing blood sugars, but also helping bind and remove things that we don't want constantly moving through our body and producing more of an issue with chronic diseases, including cancer. So I bring that up because it's an oversimplification, and it's gotten said so many times with sugar and carbs, and that it's become sort of the belief that all carbs are horrible when that's not really the case. So we're gonna end my slides. My last slide I'm going to show, and I'll turn this off, is that there is a protective note that we want to think about. Foods protect against cancer, and it's really looking at plant-based foods. So when we look at the highest anti-cancer activity, when they've looked at foods and studies, they find garlic, soybeans, cabbage, ginger, licorice, carrots, celery, cilantro, parsley, and parsnips have a huge antioxidant activity that help prevent cancer. I underline soybeans because that's the other food. Everyone's terrified of, tofu because they think it's going to make, breast cancer and the estrogens, the natural phytoestrogens are in there. But really, they're looking, when you look at even soybeans, you look at soy products, traditional soy products, not all the additives and the powders and things like that, tofu, temph, miso, that you see a decrease in the amount of cancers in those areas because those phytonutrients are protective. Modest level of cancer protection we see with onions, flax, citrus, turmeric, cruciferous vegetables like our broccoli and cauliflower, tomatoes, peppers, brown rice, and whole wheat. And then foods that do definitely show some anti-cancer activity, not the highest, but they definitely have some potential there. Oats, barley, mint, rosemary, thyme, oregano, sage, basil, and cucumber, cantaloupe, and berries. So there's a lot to be said that food can be that natural protection. And when you're eating a lot of actual plant-based foods, you're decreasing some of the wrongs that could be going on, even if I am having foods with more of these mutagenic cancer formed things from my overcharred piece of steak. So research has shown that most phytonutrients are heat stable, and meaning I can cook them, I can eat them raw. They're not going to completely be broken down and lose all their benefits to my health. So it doesn't mean I have to eat just all raw vegetables to get the benefit. They usually will last within reason. Don't char it beyond recognition. But if I'm cooking it and heating it and simmering it and stewing it, that these are great ways to incorporate into different styles of cooking and get the benefit to my health. All right, so kind of got a lot of information talking about many different foods, including fat, sugar, cooking devices, ways to cook things. So, I mean, the reality is there's probably still many, many, many question marks that we have, but I'm hoping some of this kind of points out, this can be more helpful to eat versus that. So this is the time if there's more Q&A. Some of you have had like questions or even comments or, I've experienced this. Is there anyone who wants to share anything, ask anything? Yes, Sue?
Oh, so, okay. So I have a concern about carrageenan, which is an additive that's added to a lot of dairy products like ice cream and, and yogurt and stuff like that. I think it's an emulsifier of some kind or a preservative. I know it's in Culver's frozen custard, so I don't buy it anymore. And I've heard so many bad things about that. So what are your thoughts on carrageenan?
Carrageenan, I've heard the same things, that there can be issues with it because it's an additive. It probably, again, comes down to the amount of foods and how frequently you're eating it. If I occasionally have like Culver's ice cream and that's something that's like once in 3 months, my concern over that contact with the carrageenan would be significantly reduced. It's not something that's on the high level, looking again through all the different lists, because I've looked through a lot of lists in the last month as we're getting ready for this. It's not popping up as a known carcinogen to humans, but when you get into additives and stabilizers and all these extra things that are put into food, the more ingredients that you have in there, it's the more things you have to wonder about. So I think when you're getting into minimizing those, that can be beneficial, but I wouldn't worry if it occasionally came into your diet. Does that answer your question, Sue? It's one of the mystery foods that there is a link, but it's not like I have it and I'm doomed, a few years down the line, it's going to cause a problem.
Yeah, well, there's a lady who lives in the area here where I live, and she is on the case for carrageenan, and she's testified before Congress. She's written numerous letters to the FDA to ban this product, or to ban this additive. So when I hear her talk, it's like, oh, this is the worst stuff possible. Avoid this at all costs. It's poison. So anyway, I guess there are different opinions on it.
There is, and there's something to be said for like a lot of different additives that are out there. We don't even know. I mean, there's so many different things in different amounts that are put into our food to make it shelf stable, to make it taste better, to keep it creamy. I mean, we have the most processed, or one of the most processed diets in the world, which is probably why we have more disease problems and cancer than a lot of the world, because a lot of these things that in small amounts are deemed to be safe, do we really know when the tipping point happens? Maybe I don't have that much carrageenan, but the combination of all the different things together, including having more fried foods and not having enough fiber, and look at my lifestyle and activity, those put together, all those pieces add up to like huge risk. It might be not that one thing, but there are a lot of little things that we have to kind of put together and say, well, what can I do? Like, I know I need to eat more fiber. I know I should be eating probably just more plain old salads that don't have anything done to them, like having things in different ways so that I'm protecting myself in addition to limiting the extra foods that might be, adding more carcinogens in. It's a good balance of, that's why it's so different from person to person, not just your genetics, but so many different things, like who eats an identical diet all the time, and look at what happens to each of you. I mean, you have to
Mhm.
kind of know the foods that help and limit the ones that have a question. I'm going to scroll through my picture, make sure I'm not missing. If anyone raises a hand and I don't see you, I apologize because I don't have gallery view on. Did anyone else have a question or concern about any foods, or just a thought? Joan?
I had a question here about microwaving food. I make plain oatmeal like almost every day in the microwave. So, I mean, it's not this pre-made flavored stuff. It's just plain oatmeal. So is
Right.
that?
It's like anything with heating, it's not microwaves themselves when they're looking at cancer risk. It's more the amount of heat, how hot you're making something. If you're, overheating things too much, that's what the whole picture is. So if I'm microwaving a bowl of oatmeal and I'm taking 60 seconds and it's not, boiling it and, burning it and all that, then it does decrease the risk of that. Plus, you get the benefit of the actual oatmeal, which we know with the fiber and the phytonutrients in it is an important thing to have in. And whether I'm microwaving it or boiling it, most of us aren't eating it raw. So it's okay to cook it and be able to get the benefit and get that. It's the microwaves themselves are not coming up as being, they're going to cause everyone to have cancer, but, varying your cooking techniques too, spread it out different ways. If I did cook everything the exact same way on the grill, I have a lot more risk than the person who is maybe doing a slow cooker sometimes. Maybe they're, stewing things. So it's just about kind of a balance
Well,
with that.
it's either that or I'm going to make it in my stainless steel pot, which you now say isn't so good. So
Or you could do like, the old
There's
school.
the rub.
You do the overnight oats. No, overnight oats. Soak it in the fridge,
Yeah.
put it in there overnight, ready to use, and I could slowly heat it in my little La Crusette and make sure that I don't get it. I know. It's like a crazy world because there's not 100% any way to answer this that's going to have everyone walk away feeling like, oh, thank God I'm okay, because there are so many different factors going on constantly. So it's just about maximize the good things that are helping you and try to minimize the ones that aren't. And I think that's where we get the balance with absolutely everything in life. There's no 100% anything that we can do all the time. It's, doing the best we can. I'm seeing there's chat. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything here. All right. Says, oh yeah, we brought this. Yeah, and I want to answer this one. And I brought this at the beginning for anyone came late. We talked about, so I'll read the question. I was surprised to find a warning on the Weber grill I purchased with the California's Prop 65 that is carcinogenic due to nickel content. For manufacturing the grill. I believe this is how it's stated in the warning. Does that mean what they're cooking with something carcinogenic? So I think we talked about this earlier, and if anyone wasn't here for that, you can go back and listen. But yeah, that whole warning that is a component, there's always different components that could be in food or cookware that could possibly get into your food, but sometimes not at 100% depending on the quality and if that product's breaking down. But nickel itself as in the dust form or getting into our oral and nasal cavities is linked to cancer, but will it directly cause it from a brand new grill rack? Not likely. But over time, it probably looks at the culmination of everything together. So if you have more questions, we went into it at length in the beginning of this. Anyone else with any comments? Sue, I see your hand.
Okay, so I have 2 knee replacements, and one I had 15 years ago, and I know it has nickel in it. And the other one I had 3 years ago that has titanium. So, I mean, should I be worried about the nickel implant? Because, I mean, you know, that's the way they used metal, and metal has nickel in it. So it's in my body. I mean, it's part of my body. Who knows what it's
Part of your
doing?
body. I have to be honest, I can't answer that for you. I mean, it's supposedly by contact. Is it breaking down? Is it all together? Is it a small component? I mean, that's probably
It's my whole knee. Who knows what's happening there?
I mean, it could be an interesting thing now that they're, you know, even if you're with the orthopedic surgeon you used, you know, the people who are working with those products. And I know I started 25 years ago, worked with rehab. I know that those are constantly changing, and it might be an interesting question to bring up with them. Like, why are they changing it? Have they found any increased incidence of health problems related to the older type of, you know, replacements than what we're using currently? And is that part of what's going into it? Is it durable and not sort of breaking down in your body? And is that a component too? How long can it sit in your body? Are they thinking that's going to cause a problem? But I think that's definitely a gray area for me when it comes to, I mean, a pot on my stove versus a piece in my body. I get the question and the concern of it. And I would ask the doctor, be like, hey, is there anything I should know about this? You know, any other thoughts, ladies? Other than, oh my God, what am I going to eat tonight?
What about this new,
Right.
this new cookware? It's called greenware.
Uh-huh.
And I guess it has like a ceramic coating or something on the pots and pans. Is this safe?
Yeah, the ceramic coating, from my understanding, should be safe to use because you're basically distributing heat and not having something that's, you know, in direct contact with your food. If we're worried about all the things that could be in stainless steel, you know, and different metals that we're cooking with. So at this point, that would be considered one of those things that would be safe and a good option for cookware, and also something that can be, you know, surface cooking as well as in the oven, but definitely not microwave. All right. Any more questions, ladies? Eat your vegetables. That's the end story of it. Eat your vegetables, get some fruit, and push the fiber.
Oh, so I have a question about fiber. So what do you feel about acacia, fiber that has acacia in it, as opposed to fiber that's made with wheat or like Metamucil psyllium?
I mean, psyllium fiber is more linked with being beneficial for bulk. You know, it's a nice bulking fiber. It's good for lowering cholesterol. You know, acacia, if you're getting fiber in different forms, when as far as reducing, you know, some of the blood sugars and seeing the benefit of just high fiber in general for, you know, prevention of cancer, that would be a good option. I would always I say you're always best not hinging all your bets on one thing. Get a variety of different types, just like getting a variety of different types of produce in my diet are giving me more benefit because I'm not just having one singular type of item with its phytonutrients. Everything offers a variety of different natural chemicals in it that all together, you know, in a whole diet can be helpful. So sounds like a good choice, Sue.
Okay.
All right. All right, ladies. Well, we're after 6 o'clock. We've had our hour. If anyone has any other things that they'd like to talk about in a Q&A or a question, I mean, it made it fun for this because someone had a lot of questions about carcinogens in food, which is the reason we started this up, then please feel free, like, let me know and send me an email and we'll do a Q&A on it. And it kind of, I'm sure if you have a question about it, a lot of other people do too. But thank you guys for joining me tonight. It was nice
Thank
having
you, Becky.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Becky.
Buddy.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you very much.
Very good class.
Thank you.
Very
Most appreciated.